Through unstructured interviews with family members from older generations and all from different parts of the world with different backgrounds, we were able to conclude that plastic consumption has increased remarkably compared to past generations. This trend can be explained by looking at plastic usage in modern homes. We will therefore focus on 5 ways in which a modern household may consume plastic that would not have occurred in past eras. Firstly, especially these days, we were using a lot of disposable masks. According to a study in environmental science and technology, an estimated 194 billion disposable masks and gloves are being used worldwide every month as a result of the coronavirus pandemic. Secondly, the use of plastic packaging product has been increased. Many products sold in supermarkets like Tesco, Waitrose are packaged in plastic. Third, the use of plastic storage boxes has always been used recently. In the past, wooden boxes were used more than plastic, but changed as plastic products became popular. Fourth, people consume single-use plastic items when they take away food or use food delivery services. Food delivery is increasing due to COVID-19 lockdown, which also increased the plastic consumption. Fifth, people consume plastic items while using beauty products. In 2018, in the US alone, almost 7.9 billion units of rigid plastic were created just for beauty and personal care products, according to Euromonitor Internationals. The use of plastic has completely changed our buying and usage behavior. Plastic is versatile, hygienic, lightweight, flexible, and high durable. The positive aspect of plastic consumption, considered the most important factor in modern household, is price. It encourages our consumption, making it easier for households to do bulk purchase. Today, as plastic use has become a big issue around the world, people have become more and more aware of these issues. It leads to potential behavior change in the purchase and use of plastic products.
What can authorities and companies do to reduce plastic usage and maintain production efficiency, as well maintaining a low production cost? As the general public cries out for a cleaner earth for future generations to come, companies cannot afford to ignore the public outcry anymore, and many industries have decided to. 1. Eliminate single-use plastic such as bottles, bags, straws, cups, wrappers. 2. Use more recycled plastic in their packaging. 3. Work on more effective recycling. 4. Use different materials in production, recyclable materials. And 5. Make plastic items out of 100% recyclable plastic. Some real-life examples. 1. Swedish company IKEA has also taken initiative in this matter by saying they will discontinue the usage of single-use plastic products from all of their stores and restaurants worldwide by the end of 2020. 2. McDonald's has promised to make all of its packaging using strictly renewable sources by 2025. 3. Since the process of recycling plastic is very difficult and complex, the main reason being the fact that its quality degrades when it's reheated, meaning that it cannot be used several times. Nestle has therefore decided to encourage the use of plastic and simplify the recycling process, which changes or eliminates the complex combinations of plastic that makes recycling so difficult. 4. Beverage giant Coca-Cola has pledged to reduce plastic usage by increasing recyclable materials in the production of their plastic bottles to 50% by 2030. 5. Evian, a water brand owned by Danone, has taken the initiative to produce all of its plastic bottles from 100% recyclable plastic.
We've identified a variety of different aspects of consumer behavior theory that have been adopted by various enterprises that aim to change our behavior toward plastic consumption. The first one being the dual coding theory of cognition, which states that in order to process information, verbal and visual information are needed. Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman's dual coding theory proposed that our brains work with two systems that process incoming information in different ways, one visual and one that is one of the verbal kind. Therefore, meaning that most information is processed in a cognitive manner, which brings us to our example of how this theory is implemented by corporations and enterprises. An adequate example can be how the theory is implemented by these corporations. An adequate example is maybe implementing a logo that represents something, such as the recycling logo. Well, imagine a scenario in which two bags are at the customer's disposal to place their items in at the supermarket. Even the slightest appearance of the recycling logo on one of those two bags displayed can change the decision of a person, therefore changing his or her behavior. Even changing the color of the bag into a brown one, for example, stimulates a cognitive response in people's brains to make them think it helps the environment. This phenomenon can also create a change in behavior, as most people associate the color brown to the environment. To further accentuate this idea, in a survey we've conducted on plastic consumption, the question, if supermarkets were to color code their packaging, showing what can't be recycled, would you buy the most environmentally friendly option? Resulted in 92% of the people saying yes, answering yes. Secondly, in order to change behaviors, a person has to change their attitude towards actually changing their day-to-day behavior towards a specific cause or activity. Firstly, it is important to define what is an attitude. Your attitude is a combination of what you believe or expect of a certain object or activity and how you feel about these expectations. What pushes someone to have a certain attitude is a combination of their beliefs that an object has certain attributes and evaluation of these attributes. Let's continue with the same example of using recycling bags instead of plastic ones. From a behavioral standpoint, the intended action that enterprises are looking for is for customers to start using the perhaps more expensive recyclable bags in order to preserve nature and prevent extensive plastic usage. The expectancy value theory of attitudes can be of help in this case. Adding the recycling logo on a bag, or even adding a quote, for example, that says that 29% of supermarket food packaging by weight was not easily recyclable. This quote will stimulate the emphasis on cognitive information processing, which a person endures when looking at an item. This act of changing attitudes works by hierarchy of involvement. Adding these logos or quotes onto specific objects, such as the bags, can change a person's low involvement in the cause and turn it into a high involvement, as stated in the expectancy value theory. A person with high involvement tends to be engaged in extensive research to develop his beliefs, which therefore leads to a subsequent change in attitude towards changing his behavior, meaning the person will respond to those logos and quotes by changing behavior quicker and to a larger extent after seeing them. If situations therefore can influence personality and personality can predict behavior, then situational influences also contribute to predicting behavior. And the situations we've outlined above, even the one before, may therefore have a positive impact on a person's future adopted behavior.
Another theory to change consumers' behavior is the theory of planned behavior by Einstein. One particular aspect of this theory could be of interest to one of the subjective norm. This phenomenon is based upon how you are perceived by the important others that you surround yourself with. In a study we've conducted, 56% of people were in agreement and 36% were even in strong agreement with this statement. Social pressure has an impact on people's behavior towards recycling. People care what others think about them, so for their good consciousness, they probably want that the people around them think they are helping to preserve the environment, so they change their behaviors in response to the subjective norm, which is the one of maintaining an ecological lifestyle. This situational factor, which sees people reacting to others' perception of them, can have a positive impact of the person's behaviors, who will want to change to satisfy his need for acceptance by others. A real-life example can be drawn out of this theory. For instance, the person in question wants to be perceived in a better way by his entourage. A company can facilitate that by giving out rewards to consumers who recycle or consumers who opt to buy recyclable materials instead of plastic ones, for example. This phenomenon, put up by the companies, will therefore entice people to help save the environment by giving out these rewards for good actions and at the same time helping the people by perceived in a better way by their peers, as they are doing the so-called right thing to do, in buying the recyclable materials and diminishing their consumption of plastic.
So we will start by discussing the psychological barriers. The first barrier being attitude. It is known that one's attitude has a strong correlation with their behavioral patterns. Therefore, if one individual does not have positive attitudes towards their plastic consumption, they'll be less likely to change their behavior and continue to consume plastic. So secondly, we'll be viewing the lack of principal social proof, which stands the key factor in being a barrier for people to change their outlooks on plastic consumption. So if there's a lack of role models or people for the society as a whole to look up to, they'll be less inclined to recycle and change their plastic consumption. as they don't have any footsteps to follow in. Thirdly, when there's a lack of dissonance, there's a lack of driving force in needing to see a change, especially related to plastic consumption, as people have no motivating factors to make and see a change. Finally, a practical barrier to overcome is the lack of substitutes. If there's a lack of substitutes, people will continue using cheaply available products such as plastic bottles, as they may not have the resources to be able to buy, for example, glass bottles. There's a large range of substitutes which are better for the environment, which have similar utility, however, have much higher costs. Consequently, people have less access to these. On the next slide, we'll be viewing how we can overcome these barriers. On the psychological side, we can make investments in dissonance in the form of creating more scaremongering advertisements to inform people of the dangers of plastic consumption, which will trigger them to make a change. Living in an increasingly higher digitalized world really highlights the importance of using influencers with large platforms to increase social proof. It is a given that social status motivates people, so they have the potential to transfer empowering messages and help trigger behavioral change through social connections. On the next slide, we will be seeing how the practical barriers can be overcome, and this is mainly done through government funding. So firstly, they can introduce the implementation of the bottle returning scheme, where upon returning your empty bottles, you get back your deposit. Secondly, they could also increase the cost of plastic bags in order to reduce the usage of plastic bags and encourage people to switch to reusable bags. And thirdly, the government could reduce landfill taxes for those individuals who recycle regularly, and this can be used as an incentive to encourage recycling.
So, after the amazing comments by my colleague Emmanuel, you might be wondering, what else can governments and companies do to more effectively change people's plastic consumption? Well, first they should continue using the current methods. Data has shown that there has been an improvement in consumer behavior in relation to their plastic use. Thus, the logical first step is for governments and companies to continue and also increase how much they employ the aforementioned methods that they're currently using. These aforementioned methods are the ones that my colleagues touched upon in the prior slides, such as the dual coding theory and the subjective norm. However, governments and companies need to go the extra mile, because as a society, we still have ways to go before we can consider our relationship with plastic healthy. Other methods that government and companies can employ is to increase the dissonance caused in consumers when they're using plastic products. So, for instance, if we're able to cause dissonance when consumers are using plastics, we will likely arouse attitude change, because dissonance will cause a self-reflection, and if they believe that they should decreases dissonance, consumers will change their behavior. And since it comes from a self-reflection, this change in behavior, it generally leads to longer and more established change. So, and this is what we're really looking for, right? Because we want a long-term change in plastic use. We don't want just a temporary thing, because this is a long-term issue, right? Another method that we saw that we believe could decrease and persuade people to decrease their plastic consumption is the operant conditioning theory by B.F. Skinner, which states that if you reinforce stimulus following a behavior, it is more likely that the behavior will occur again in the future. So if we create a positive reinforcement to people to recycle, to decrease their plastic consumption, for example, giving them a reward or giving them tax discounts, it's likely that they will continue decreasing their plastic consumption and redoing this behavior of decreasing it. So this perhaps is another method where we can have a long-term plan to decrease human plastic consumption. Finally, another method we could use is also increase the utility and availability of plastic substitutes, as this would also decrease the attractiveness of plastic use and their consumption. You may be wondering, after all these theories and methods analyzed, how we as a group would attempt to influence people to decrease their plastic consumption. On the right, you can see a mock-up that we made as a group, which was based on the data we collected and the theories we analyzed, and it has the aim of persuading people to decrease their plastic consumption. On the top, you can see our slogan, "Stop Talking Trash," that we believe is quite memorable, and also the color palette will bring a lot of attention and make people look at it. We also try to apply dissonance, and we personified Earth and clearly show that you, the reader, is hurting Earth through your plastic use. And finally, we tried to appeal to the authority by using the imperative. As you see, the world needs your help, be the help the world needs. Now my friend Wassam will take over.
In addition to that, our mockup implements an aspect of the dual coding theory, the one of the visual information. The universal logo of warning is apparent on our mockup, which is a visual sign that will be processed by the customer and can then be used by that person to trigger a change in his or her behavior, perhaps. Finally, we've added a stat in the form of a quote, which can have a positive impact on a customer, turning his low involvement in the sustainability cause into a high one after reading a shocking stat like that. All in all, we think that this mockup poster is a perfect gateway to influence people's behaviors towards supporting the cause of plastic waste, thanks to all the specific communication techniques showcased on it.